Hello and welcome. My name is Alan, and today we'll be reading three pieces from Albert Einstein. The first piece is called H.A. Lorentz's Work in the Cause of International Cooperation. Written in 1927, H.A. Lorentz, a Dutch theoretical physicist who was one of the greatest scientists of his times. His work covered many fields of physics, but his most outstanding contributions were to the theory of electromagnetism in all its ramifications. His discoveries prepared the ground for many of the modern developments in physics, most particularly for the theory of relativity. After World War I, Lorentz put a great deal of effort into the reorganizations of international cooperation, particularly among scientists. Owing to his undisputed prestige and the respect which he enjoyed among scholars of all countries, his endeavors met with success. During the last years of his life, he was chairman of the League of Nations Committee of Intellectual Cooperation. This essay appeared in Mijn Weltbild, Amsterdam, Querido Verlag, 1934. With the extensive specialization of scientific research which the 19th century brought about, it has become rare for a man occupying a leading position in one of the sciences to manage to, at the same time, to do valuable service to the community in the sphere of international organization and international politics. Such service demands not only strength, insight, and a reputation based on solid achievements, but also a freedom from national prejudice and a devotion to the common ends of all, which have become rare in our times. I have met no one who combined all these qualities in himself so perfectly as H.A. Lorentz. The marvelous thing about the effect of his personality was this: independent and stubborn natures, such as the particularly common among men of learning, do not readily bow to another's will, and for the most part only accept his leadership grudgingly. But when Lorentz is in the presidential chair, an atmosphere of happy cooperation is invariably created, however much those present may differ in their aims and habits of thought. The secret of this success lies not only in his swift comprehension of people and things and his marvelous command of language, but above all in this, that one feels that his whole heart is in the business at hand, and that when he is at work, he has room for nothing else in his mind. Nothing disarms the recalcitrant so much as this. Before the war, Lorentz's activities in the cause of international relations were confined to presiding at congresses of physicists. Primarily, or particularly noteworthy among these were the Solvay Congresses, the first two of which were held at Brussels in 1909 and 1911. Then came the European War, which was a crushing blow to all who had the improvement of human relations in general at heart. Even before the war was over, and still more after its end, Lorentz devoted himself to the work of international reconciliation. His efforts were especially directed toward the reestablishment of fruitful and friendly cooperation between men of learning and scientific societies. An outsider can hardly conceive that uphill work can hardly conceive what uphill work this was. The accumulated resentment of the war period had not yet died down, and many influential men persisted in the irreconcilable attitude into which they had allowed themselves to be driven by the pressure of circumstances. Lorentz's efforts resembled those of a doctor with a recalcitrant patient who refuses to take the medicines carefully prescribed for his benefit. But Lorentz was not to be deterred. Once he had recognized a course of action as the right one. Right after the war, he joined the governing body of the Council de Recherche, which was founded by the scholars of the victorious countries, and from the scholars and learned societies of the Central Powers were excluded. His object in taking this step, which caused great offense to the academic world of the Central Powers, was to influence this institution in such a way that he could be expanded into something truly international. He and other right-minded men succeeded, after repeated efforts, in securing the removal of the offensive exclusion clause from the statutes of the council. The goal, which was the restoration of normal and fruitful cooperation between learned societies, is, however, not yet attained, because the academic world of the Central Powers, exasperated by nearly 10 years of exclusion from practically all international scientific gatherings, has got into a habit of keeping itself to itself. Now, however, there are good grounds for hoping that the ice will soon be broken, thanks to the tactful efforts of Lorentz, prompted by pure enthusiasm for the good cause. Lorentz has also devoted his energies to the service of international cultural ends in another way. By consenting to serve on the League of Nations Committee of Intellectual Cooperation, which was called into existence some 5 years ago with Bergson as chairman. For the last year, Lorentz has presided over the committee, which, with the active support of its subordinate, the Paris Institute, is to act as a go-between in the domain of intellectual and artistic activity among the various spheres of culture. There, too, the beneficent influence of this wise, humane, and modest personality, whose outspoken but faithfully followed device is not mastery but service, will lead people on the right way. May his example contribute to the triumph of that spirit. So, yeah, Einstein's basically talking of H.A. Lorentz, how he sees him really bringing the international community together, not just in scientific ways, but even in a cultural sense. And the high praise he had for H.A. Lorentz. Next piece we're going to read is called Address at the Grave of H.A. Lorentz. Lorentz, born 1853, died 1928. This address was published in Mein Weltbild, Amsterdam, Corrido Verlag, 1934. It is as the representative of the German-speaking academic world, and in particular the Prussian Academy of Sciences, but above all as a pupil and affectionate admirer, that I stand at the grave of the greatest and noblest man of our times. His genius led the way from Maxwell's work to the achievement of contemporary physics, to which he contributed important building stones and methods. He shaped his life like an exquisite work of art, down to the smallest detail. His never-failing kindness and generosity and a sense of justice, coupled with a sure and intuitive understanding of people and human affairs, made him a leader in any sphere he entered. Everyone followed him gladly, for they felt that he never set out to dominate, but only to serve. His work and his example will live on as an inspiration and a blessing to many generations. So, Einstein, basically noting he feels that H.A. Lorentz will be a great contributor to science, even for the future, even though he had just passed away at this point. And he feels that he picked up um, led the way from Maxwell's work to the achievements of contemporary physics, which I believe they're talking about Max Planck. I'm assuming, I'm not certain on that, but it's probably they're referring to Max Planck. Um, although maybe just someone with the last name Maxwell. So again, I'm unsure. But yeah, just talking about his mind and how he is more than just a great scientist, but also just a great person. And we got one more piece we're going to read, and this one's a little bit longer, about 3 pages, so bear with me. It's called H.A. Lorentz, Creator and Personality. It was a message delivered at Leyden, Holland, 1953, for the commemoration of the 100th anniversary of the birth of Lorentz, published in Mein Weltbild, Zurich, Europa Verlag, 1953. At the turn of the century, the theoretical physicists of all nations considered H.A. Lorentz as the leading mind among them, and rightly so. The physicists of our times are mostly not fully aware of the decisive part which H.A. Lorentz played in shaping the fundamental ideas in theoretical physics. The reason for this strange fact is that Lorentz's basic ideas have become so much a part of them that they are hardly able to realize quite how daring these ideas have been and to what extent they have simplified the foundations of physics. When H.A. Lorentz started his creative scientific work, Maxwell's theory on electromagnetism had already won out. But there was inherent in this theory a peculiar complexity of the fundamental principles which prevented its essential features from revealing themselves distinctly. Though the field concept had indeed displaced the concept of action at a distance, the electric and magnetic fields were not yet conceived as primary entities, but rather as states of ponderable matter, which latter was treated as a continuum. Consequently, the electric field disappeared or appeared decomposed into the electric field strength and the dielectric displacement. In the simplest case, these two fields were connected by the dielectric constant, but in principle they were considered and treated as independent entities. The magnetic field was treated similarly. It was in accordance with this basic idea to treat empty space as a special case of ponderable matter in which the relation between field strength and displacement happened to be particularly simple. In particular, this interpretation brought it about that the electric and magnetic field could not be conceived independent of the state of motion of matter, which was considered the carrier of the field. A good idea of the interpretation of Maxwell's electrodynamics then prevailing may be gained from the study of H. Lorentz's investigation in the electrodynamics of moving bodies. Then came H.A. Lorentz's decisive simplification of the theory. He based the investigation with unfaltering consistency upon the following hypothesis. The seat of electromagnetic field is the empty space. In it, there are only one electric and one magnetic field vector. This field is generated by atomistic electric charges upon which the field in turn exerts ponderomotive forces. The only connection between the electromagnetic field and ponderable matter arises from the fact that elementary electric charges are rigidly attached to the atomistic particles of matter. For the latter, Newton's law of motion holds. Upon this simplified foundation, Lorentz based a complete theory of all electromagnetic phenomena, known as the time, including those of electrodynamics of moving bodies. It is a work of such consistency, lucidity, and beauty as has only rarely been attained in an empirical science. The only phenomenon that could not be entirely explained in this basis, i.e., without additional assumptions, was the famous Michelson-Morley experiment. Without the localization of the electromagnetic field in empty space, this experiment could not conceivably conceivably have led to the theory of special relativity. Indeed, the essential step was just the reduction of electromagnetism to Maxwell's equations in empty space, or, as it was expressed at one time, in either. H.A. Lorentz had even discovered the Lorentz transformation, later called after him, though without recognizing its group character. To him, Maxwell's equations in empty space held only for a particular coordinate system distinguished from all other coordinate systems by its state of rest. This was a truly paradoxical situation because the theory seemed to restrict the inertial system more strongly than did classical mechanics. This circumstance, which from the empirical point of view appeared completely unmotivated, was bound to lead to the theory of special relativity. Thanks to the generosity of the University of Leiden, I frequently spend some time there staying with my dear and unforgettable friend, Paul Ehrenfest. Thus, I had often the opportunity to attend Lorentz's lectures, which he gave regularly to a small circle of young colleagues after he had already retired from his professorship. Whatever came from this supreme mind was as lucid and beautiful as a good work of art, and was presented with such faculty and ease as I have never experienced in anybody else. If we younger people had known H.A. Lorentz only as a sublime mind, our admiration and respect for him would have been unique. But what I feel when I think of H.A. Lorentz is far more than that. He meant more to me personally than anybody else I have met in my lifetime. Just as he was in command of physics and of the mathematical formalism, thus he also was in command of himself without effort and strain. His quite unusual lack of human frailties never had a depressing effect on others. Everybody felt his superiority, but nobody felt oppressed by it. Though he had no illusions about people and human affairs, he was full of kindness toward everybody and everything. Never did he give the impression of domineering, always observing and helping. He was extremely conscientious without allowing anything to assume undue importance. A subtle humor guarded him, which was reflected in his eyes and in his smile. And it fits that, notwithstanding all his devotion to science, he was convinced that our comprehension cannot penetrate too deeply into the essence of things. Only in my later years was I able to appreciate fully this half skeptical, half humble attitude. In spite of my honest attempts, I find that language, or at least my language, cannot do justice to the subject of this short piece of writing. Therefore, I shall only quote two short sayings of Lorentz's that impressed me particularly deeply. I am happy to belong to a nation that is too small to commit big follies. To a man who in conversation during the First World War tried to convince him that in the human sphere fate is determined by might and force, he gave this reply: "It is conceivable that you are right, but I would not want to live in such a world." So yeah, Einstein, again, really talking about Lorentz's value as not just a scientist, but as a human being, as a man. He almost gushes at how wonderful he feels Lorentz is. So, yeah, I had to read those three pieces together since they were all about H.A. Lorentz. So, but that's going to be it for now. As always, educate thyself, think, read, study, learn. Someone tries to tell you something you have trouble believing, ask them to cite their sources. But I'll see you all in the next video. Until then, later.